Well, we've talked about the comparability of uncontrolled agreements that you might observe between uncontrolled parties that you're going to use to create your comparable and controlled transactions for pricing the transfer of intangibles, the licensing agreements of intangibles between related parties. I want to talk a little bit about what the actual sources are that you can use to get to that data. Now, this video is not going to be an in-depth video on how to search those sources precisely. That's coming later in our playlist. But I just want to talk a little bit broadly about where the data comes from and what are the various sources that you can turn to get to the data. So, in general, most of the data that you'll find in the databases comes from SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission filings that companies have filed as part of their Form 10K or 20F forms. And the agreements are found several places within there, but they are primarily filed as an Exhibit 10-99, 1099 material contracts. So when firms file their financial statements, they need to disclose these material contracts, and these material contracts often have all the detailed information you may need to qualify them as being comparable or not comparable to the controlled transaction that you're studying. There are also some other sources that include the Canadian and the United Kingdom exchanges and filings. They're a little bit more limited in their availability, but they are out there also. But here's where you generally find these types of sources. There are some other places that people will look. Say, for example, it may come up in court filings, etc. But primarily, it's going to be things filed with the SEC in the financial reporting world. That said, your ability to get through to this information is going to be constrained. What you can find from this is going to be limited. You're going to need to consider various different sources you can turn to, and it's going to be a question of becoming sophisticated at creating a good search strategy so that you can quickly find the documents that you should be reviewing and eliminate the ones that you shouldn't be spending time on. Looking at these agreements can become incredibly time intensive, so you need to develop a system by which you can deal with this relatively quickly. This is one of the areas of work in which we sometimes outsource to related parties in other jurisdictions, something to keep in mind. So part of it is how sophisticated is the database that you're tapping into, and whether it's good at helping you sort through all of the agreements that might be out there to get to the ones that are most helpful to you. So that said, here is an overview of the agreements of the sources, the databases that have summarized the agreements in a way that you might go about searching for it. And in some ways, you might notice that we put the first two at the top. Let's just mark them off as KT Mine and Intangible Spring. These are probably the two sources you're going to turn to most often. All right. The negative is they cost us some money, but the positive is that they have a great deal of available information and that they've been designed to be able to be searched effectively and easily. There are some other sources you may turn to. Royalty Source, it's quick, it's cheap, which is all good, but it's not as effective at times, and it often has redacted agreements. So there's nothing worse than pouring through an agreement, trying to figure out whether it's going to work for you or not, and then find out that they've redacted something critical like the actual royalty rate, something like that. LexisNexis is a very broad database of materials, and so it will have such things as a lot of financial filings. It'll also have articles. It will have many court proceedings, etc. And it doesn't cost us out of pocket, but the time factor can be quite intense. So never lose track of how costly your billable time is to the client, and therefore spending a little money on getting to the data is a wise investment. You may remember in an earlier video I talked about if the licensing was for, say, a combination of trade name, trademarks, and business processing, know-how, and other sort of process things, that sounds very much like a franchise. And so there are guides, bond franchise guides, that you might want to use. It's a well-known source. This one is actually old school. It's a paperback hard copy, so you have to go through it in that manner. But it will give you identify some possible cuts that you may then go back and have to search some of the other databases for in order to get all the details that you need. There's also the World Franchising, which is an online database with access. It doesn't have full data, but it may help you spot agreements that you then might be able to find the full data for in other sources. Now, if you have questions about databases, here are a couple of contact names. If it has to do with access and administrative items, the fees that are going to be charged, etc., the best person to contact is Arlene. If, on the other hand, it is to do with how to search these databases, the technical side of executing in searches for cuts, then you're probably better off reaching out to Matthew. And that concludes this presentation on the sources. Thank you and have a great day. Bye now.